Welcome back with a smiley face. A link of previous episodes is provided into the description of the video. You can also join us on Patreon to listen more unlimited audiobooks like this. You can also visit and shop our ebooks. His Revenge to Restitution. Episode 7. Chapter 44 to 51. Liam. When I finally calmed down last night, Azalea wouldn't speak to me. I knew it was punishment for my behavior. Gavin had to point out that I was directing everything at her, which was unfair to her. I hated how right he could sometimes be. She took a long, hot bath, then took her time to braid her hair, and goddess knows what else before she finally retired from the bathroom. She glided right past me to climb into bed, and I had to rush around the bed and stop her to get her to listen to my apology. When I agreed not to kick Azran out of the pack, for the time being, she let go of her anger with me. She ended up under me once again, and I fell asleep exhausted. I woke up to a message from Damien asking to talk after breakfast this morning. After waking Azalea up, we started our day. I didn't see Damien when we were eating, so after getting the kids off to school for Azalea and Lily, I went to my office to wait. Beta Meadow had sent over some things that she believed Warwick was involved with, business associations and transactions. She was a pretty impressive she-wolf. Alpha Lombardi certainly seemed challenging to work with, but she somehow managed to do that and help us. I needed to look over the information she sent as well as start looking at making arrangements for my father. As I worked, I found it difficult to concentrate with my father's arrangements hanging over my head. Just as I was about to find Azalea to distract me for a few minutes, Damien's head popped through the doorway. "Hey," I said. "Is now a bad time?" he asked. "No," I said. I needed a break from all this anyway. I waved to the printouts in front of me. I started haphazardly piling and moving them to the side. "What did you want to talk about?" Damien's shoulders dropped a bit as he came in and sat in the chair across from me. We had been in this same position so many times I couldn't even count. "Still got that whiskey?" he asked. I furrowed my brow. "Is it that bad?" I asked. He just shrugged. I dug into my bottom drawer and pulled out the small liquor bottle and 2 glasses. I poured us each a double, and Damien reached forward to grab a glass. He took a long swig and swirled his drink around in his glass. "Spit it out," I said, taking a sip. "You need to decide who will replace me," he said without making eye contact. "Replace you?" I asked, setting my glass down. "Liam, I am resigning as your beta," he said, finally looking up at me. "No, you aren't," I barked. "Don't do that. Don't make this harder," he said, looking away again. He took another drink before continuing. "Liam, I can't be beta like this. Who would look up to me? I am ruined. We both know that I may never be able to connect with Cage again. I can't help you lead a pack of wolves when I have no idea if I will ever have control of mine again." "No, Damien, I don't accept this," I said. I was completely blindsided. Yes, things weren't magically fixed now that he was awake, but that didn't matter. We knew what was wrong, and we would continue to look for a fix. How could he even think that I wanted him to resign in any world? "Liam, you need to stop thinking about this like I am your best friend. You are Alpha, and you need to do what is best for the pack," he said in a defeated voice. "I have thought a lot about this. There is a lot of quiet in my head now with Cage gone." "No, Damien, you need to stop," I said angrily. "You listen to me. You will not be resigning as beta. You are right, I am Alpha, and I need to think about the welfare of this pack above our friendship. But guess what? The best thing for this pack is to have an alpha with a beta he can trust above all else. You have never let me down, ever. You call me and put me in my place when I need it. Without all your help, I would never be in the position I am. Our pack would not be as healthy and thriving as it is. I wouldn't be sitting here because I would never have gotten Azalea back after all the times she has been targeted. I am only the alpha I am because my best friend is the best beta on this planet. I will not accept losing you just because of this little issue. Little issue? Liam, I have no access to Cage. I can't do anything while shifted because I am not in control, and Cage has no clue what is happening. I can't help you when I can't even help myself. I could hear the frustration and anguish in his voice. He didn't want this, but his conscience told him he had to do this. He didn't have Cage in his head backing him up anymore. He lost his confidence without his wolf. You don't need to help yourself because you have me. And Lily and Azalea too. None of us will stop until we figure this out or find someone who can. This pack doesn't need a change in leadership right in the middle of a war. They need the beta they love and trust to recover and come back to them, to show our enemies that they can knock us down, but we will get back up and keep fighting. I stood up and turned around, squeezing the bridge of my nose between my fingers. Damien couldn't do this, not when I just lost my father. I needed him. I'm sorry, he said, breaking the tense silence between us. I turned around, and he had his head hung, slowly swirling the last dregs of his drink. He slowly finished it and placed the glass on my desk. You don't need to be sorry for what happened. But I will not let you make this mistake, and that is what this is, Damien, a mistake. Does Lily even know what you are in here to do? He shook his head, still not making eye contact. Damien, we have been through too much for you to quit on me now. If you do this, I can't win this war. Warwick will find a way to take everything from me, kill our entire pack then me. He will ruin our whole world if you don't help me stop him. Don't make me do this without you. It was a plea but also a command. He couldn't quit the job he spent his whole life training for, working his A*s off for. Betas were chosen, it wasn't a birthright like being the firstborn child to an alpha. Damien was taught that by his father from a very young age and ensured that he would never be anything less than the perfect candidate for the job. He pushed me and kept me in line when I was spiraling. In some ways, I needed him just as much as I needed Azalea. If I hurt someone, he started. You won't, I stopped him. He looked up at me. I won't let you do it. Cage won't hurt someone if we can figure out how to keep him sane until you are connected again. Letting him out regularly will help. Damien nodded. What if this is a mistake? He asked. It isn't, I told him. I know that because I know you, and you already have some ideas on how exactly we take out this. The corner of his mouth twitched up in a half smile. I might have a thought or two. Got a lot of time on my hands to think while I am working out. Pour another round and fill me in, I said, retaking my seat. Damien reached over the desk and refilled both our glasses, then, we got down to business. Azalea. Liam was busy in his office and had been radio silent. It was a nice break considering he apologized before bed only to pull me. I know everyone processes grief in their own way, but I was worried he was avoiding his feelings. I had to push my worries aside and figure out what to do about meeting with Warwick. Now that Felix was with me every day again, I felt like I had a small amount of flexibility in his proximity. Azrin had taken Liam's directions very seriously and seldom left me in a room alone. Felix would at least go to the hall when he could tell I was not in the mood for company or needed to have a sensitive conversation. I needed to do something to put a stop to all of this. As things went on, the stakes became higher. Now Robert was dead, and I could see Liam hurting even more. He was upset about the old man, but I think he was more hurt because I was hurting. I couldn't bear to see him hurt anymore, and I wanted to find a way to stop this before he ran off to risk his life to kill Warwick. I didn't want to lose my mate, and I didn't want this fight to be inherited by our children either. If I could figure out what started this all years ago, maybe I could find a compromise to end the conflict. The first order of business was obtaining a witch. I wasn't even sure where to look. I couldn't exactly broadcast what I was doing either. My eyes fell to the velvet box I had placed on my desk. An idea struck me, and it sent in motion a whole plan. I reached for my phone to call Theodore first when someone knocked and opened my door. Lissa walked in with Felix shrugging his shoulders from the doorway behind her. I set my phone back down and smiled softly at her. "Lissa, it's nice to see you. How are you feeling?" I asked. "I've seen better days," she said. She gravitated right over to the baby swing where Isley was laying, dozing contentedly. She bent over, smiling happily at her. "Did you need something?" I asked her. I was hoping that I could leave after my phone call. This Warwick matter seemed time-sensitive, so I wanted to figure it out quickly. If I could find a way to get him to back off his crusade, maybe we could end this without any more bloodshed. "No," she said. "I just thought I would come to see my grandpup. Not much to do all alone in the house." My heart squeezed. She was lonely. It was the first time I had seen her since we made it back to tell her. She looked older and tired. Maybe even a bit thinner. Of course, she was getting older, but she wasn't too old by werewolf standards at all. Losing Robert was having a physical effect on her. I hoped she wasn't too hurt. Losing one's mate often led to suicide to escape the pain. "Would you like to spend the afternoon with Isley possibly?" I asked her. She smiled, looking up at me. "Would that be all right?" she asked. "Of course," I said quickly. Actually, I was about to pop out to meet someone, so it would be extremely helpful. "I would love to watch her," she said. Her face relaxed a bit, and she went back to looking at her. Isley's eyes fluttered open, and she let out a happy little coo. "I would be happy to collect the boys after school too. Delilah and Lucas as well. I'm sure that would be okay. They may want to play games in the backyard after school. That is where they usually end up with Felix," I told her. "Isley and I can cheer them on," she said with a big grin on her face. She bent over and carefully picked up my baby girl. "Right, little princess." She was lost in Isley now. If spending time with the kids helped her through the grief, I couldn't deny her time with them. "Okay," I said. "Felix and I will be back later. I will text you if I won't be home in time for the boys." "Be safe," she said, not looking up from Isley. I grabbed my cell phone and purse, then stuffed the watch box inside and headed to the door where Felix stood, listening. I looked at him as I walked by. "Can you let Liam know that his mother is here and watching the kids for the rest of the day? We need to visit Theodore, he should be staying somewhere right outside the town." Felix nodded. "I know where he is." "Great," I smiled happily and headed down the hall. If I did this all correctly, I could figure out how this watch works and get myself a witch to help facilitate the meeting with Warwick. If I didn't, Liam would be furious, and I would end up on lockdown until this war was over. All I hoped was that it was the former. Chapter 45 Since Theodore was staying right on the edge of town, Felix drove us there. It was a quiet ride, but I was already used to this type of quiet with Felix. After years together, it was normal and expected. When we finally arrived, I was surprised that the place was a small, ordinary-looking house stuck right in the middle of a neighborhood. Theo could walk anywhere in town from here, and it was inconspicuous. Did you think we wouldn't find a good place to keep him hidden? We don't want Warwick getting to him after all, Felix said as we got out of the car. Theo greeted us at the door. Azalea, Felix, to what do I owe the pleasure? He asked, looking calm. Hello, Theo. I had something I wanted to discuss with you. Would you mind if we came in? I greeted him. Certainly, he said. He led us inside and down a front hall to a small living room. Felix, I do hope you and Lacey are getting along well, he said as he sat in the puffy armchair. I took a seat on the small couch while Felix stood next to me. He nodded his assent, and I laughed. He is very excited for the pup, I told Theo. I looked up at Felix and thought I saw just the hint of a blush on his cheeks. I am sure it is exhilarating, Theodore said. So, what did you need to come all the way out here to speak with me about? I dug in my bag to retrieve the watch box. I was about to call when Lissa came in, so I apologize if we are interrupting in any way, I started. I recently came into possession of an item that I believe has been enchanted by a witch. I was wondering if you possibly knew anything about it. I opened the box and showed him the watch. He leaned forward, and I stretched my arm out to give him the box. He examined the watch for a moment. There is an inscription on the back and a note in the bottom of the box, under the watch seat, I told him. He removed the watch, examining its back then moving on to the note. He said. I anxiously waited for him to say something. So, do you have any ideas? I asked. I am afraid not. I have seen items like this before, though, he said. It was definitely spelled by the witch. My best guess is that the required incantation would bring the user onto some equal footing to whoever their opposition may be. But what does that mean? How could it make you equal? I asked. I could not comment on that specifically. I would hazard to say that would depend on the intent for the creation of the watch, he explained. Do you know how I might find any of this out? I asked, hoping he would tell me I needed a witch. That was what Robert had said in the bank. I suggest finding a witch. It may be near impossible to find the one that did the spell, but a good witch may be able to decipher the magic on the item. Do you know where it came from? I got it from Mr. Greyback, the inn's former owner. I was given it in his will, I explained. Ah, well then tracking down this watch's origins may be impossible. You should get in contact with a witch that may be willing to help you, he said. He handed me back the watch. I thought you might say that, I told him. You wouldn't happen to know any? Theo laughed. I know I have proven to be a bit resourceful, but no, I do not know any witches. I am afraid they are far rarer of an occurrence than werewolves and vampires. I deflated a little. I had no other ideas about how to find a witch. While I was interested in knowing how this watch worked, I very much wanted to try to contact Warwick. Ahem, Felix cleared his throat. Luna. Yes. I said, turning to him, trying to think about my next steps. I may know a witch that could assist, he said. I went rigid and stared at my bodyguard in confusion. How? I asked. Felix wasn't one for many words or unnecessary details, but I felt this warranted a little explanation on his part. He had been with Blood Eclipse and me for close to a decade now. When did he interact with a witch, especially if they were hard to come across? My first mate was a witch, he explained. I still have contact information for a few of her colleagues. My eyebrows shot up in surprise. Really? I asked. He nodded in response. Do you think any would be willing to come meet with me? I can make a call, he said. Felix, I would greatly appreciate that, I said. He pointed to the box in my hands. I held it up, and he took it from me. He opened it and pulled out his cell phone. He took a picture of the watch and quickly typed something into his phone. He handed me back the watch, and I gave him a grateful smile. Thank you, Felix. Well, Luna, Theo said. I am sorry I couldn't be of more assistance. I stood as well. That's all right, Theo. I had to check all my possibilities. I hope things are okay for you here. Yes, he said, smiling despondently. I presume it is a better place to spend the last of my days. I'd rather be here and comfortable than running from those that know of my cooperation with you. Wait, I said. What do you mean? Theo laughed. You must have realized. All my kinship will perish when your mate kills my sire as he intends to do. If you cut the head off the snake, the body will die. I didn't realize. Theodore, there must be some way I can help you. Without his assistance, Damien could have died, and we wouldn't have an almost completely trained vampire-killing army ready to wage war. I appreciate the sentiment, dear girl, but I reckon I have lived enough life. If I am going to go, at least I help stop some evil in the world, he said. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Theodore, I whispered in disbelief. I do appreciate your concern, he said. I am at peace with this decision, or I would not have offered your mate my help. Please, do not fret over a too-old vampire like me. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded my head. All right, I said. It's probably time for you to get back to your pack. Thank you for the visit, and I hope you are able to track down a witch to help you with that watch. Theo held out his hand for me to shake. I took it and pulled him into a hug. Felix and I left, heading back to the pack house. Again, silence filled the car, but now there was a heaviness in the air. I was worried about Theo and how ending Warwick would end his life as well. I could tell something was on Felix's mind, but I could not guess about what. Chapter 46. Lemon. I opened the freezer and snagged out my pint of double chocolate chunk ice cream. I always have one for rough days. These past couple of days had turned in that direction. I tossed the lid on the counter and sunk my spoon into the soft, velvety goodness. I stood at the counter, shoving spoonful after spoonful of ice cream into my mouth, trying not to think about Axel and Missy. I was failing miserably. I moved over to the fridge, standing in the open door with my ice cream. How could a 17-year-old handle this so much better than me? How was she coping when I couldn't even decide if I was ready to consider dating Axel? I inspected the contents of my fridge, but nothing was catching my attention. Axel caught my attention. Axel was catching my attention a lot recently. How could I not notice him? The way his shoulders shook when his laugh filled his chest. The way his eyes seemed to sparkle when he caught me looking at him. The rough strength of his hands. I brought my spoon down into the ice cream cartoon only to find it empty. I grabbed my unopened bottle of wine from the fridge and tossed the ice cream carton out. I got myself a glass and poured a generous amount. It wasn't all about how Axel was catching my attention, though. It was also about all the potential harm in my future. Not just emotional harm, either. I now realized physical harm was also a possibility. How was I supposed to know what was the right move here? Even if I could call my mom for advice, she couldn't help me. She was a part of the blissfully unaware population of normal humans that had nothing to do with vampires or their daughters. I stared into the purple-red liquid, wishing it would just tell me what to do. I considered calling Lee. After all, she could relate to this struggle after being with us for so long. I felt guilty calling her with my trivial relationship problems when she was dealing with their vampire problem, Liam's father dying, and all the kids. I set my wine glass on the counter and ran my hands down my face. When had I become this girl? When did I become the girl whose whole life centered around a guy? I was not this girl. I was not the girl that let herself be plagued by indecision. I cleaned up my act and fixed my life. I made myself into a level-headed, intelligent woman who now manages an entire inn. I found solutions, I didn't wallow over problems. An idea hit me, I could solve this logically. I ran to my bedroom and into my closet. In the corner tucked behind my coats was a dry erase board. It was perfect. I pulled it out of the closet and carried it back to the kitchen before searching for some markers. I refilled my glass and took a long swig. Pros and cons. I needed to put it all down on paper, and then I could clearly see the decision in front of me. I wouldn't go to bed tonight until I could make a decision, I promised myself. The first few things on both sides were easy. Cons: Axel has a mate somewhere, werewolves equals danger. Pros: safety, loyalty, he likes me from there. Things got trickier. Vampires were a definite con in this equation. I shuddered every time I thought about those guys who attacked me at the inn. It felt shallow, but Axel's looks had to go in the pro category as well. It wasn't fair to leave it out when I never got tired of looking at him. After 2 glasses of wine, I knew I needed to add some food into this equation, or things would go south in this little exercise. I decided on pancakes, because why not? I moved around the kitchen, mixing up a batter and frying them up. As I worked, I continued to work on my pro and con list. When my pancakes were done, I pulled up a stool next to the counter and sat down with my stack. I slowly munched as I stared down at my list. The argument was clear in front of me. One column was entirely what-ifs. It was all possibilities that could or could not happen. The other column was all established facts. They were things I already knew I could count on when it came to Axel. But could I really accept it? Axel. I pumped my legs as fast as they would go, constantly searching as I went. I decided some extra patrols might help burn off some of this pent-up energy inside. Lemon's words just kept playing in my mind on repeat. If I acted on my feelings, if I were to open my heart to you, would I be in danger like Missy? Would I have to be worried about being kidnapped or those things coming back here to attack me? I'm scared, Axel. My wolf was ambivalent to my plight. He liked Lemon but was still on board to wait for our mate. I couldn't stand to live my life any longer waiting for a she-wolf who may never come. I wanted to be happy, and Lemon made me happy. Every time I walked into the inn now, her attention snapped to the front door. I knew it was happening even when it wasn't me coming inside. She would get the slightest smile on her lips like her day just got brighter. I wanted to keep making her days brighter. When she wasn't wrapped up in her head, she was the best company. We could talk or just silently exist together. It was easy. She was the most adorable force of nature, too. She wasn't petite or fragile looking but still extraordinarily feminine. Her legs went on for miles, and that midnight black hair always shined. Whether dressed all business or completely casual, she came across as nothing but an independent, confident woman. I would have given anything to pull her soft body flush to mine and show her exactly how much I cared about her. It was so hard to resist just kissing her every time I got close. If I acted on my feelings, if I were to open my heart to you, would I be in danger like Missy? She had feelings for me. She all but admitted it. She also had legitimate concerns about what being together could mean. I couldn't promise her she would never be in danger, that was just how our world worked. I pushed myself even harder, making my body go faster. The full moon was out tonight, and a few new wolves in the woods were shifting for the first time. Their howls could be heard through the trees. Would I have to be worried about being kidnapped or those things coming back here to attack me? I'm scared, Axel. I didn't want her to be scared of being with me. I wanted the opposite of that. I wanted to be the place she felt the safest. What could I do to eliminate those risks, though? Leave the pack, my wolf mused sarcastically. That wasn't an option, and he knew it. I couldn't leave Blood Eclipse. I liked my position, and I actually enjoyed being out here with the town. I doubted Lemon would want to move away from here, she grew up in this town and had a good job. I made my fourth pass around the perimeter. My body was started to feel fatigued, but my mind wasn't stopping. I slowed myself and made my way back to my house. It sat right on the edge of the thickest part of the forest, giving me easy access to cover to shift. I didn't bother to get dressed as I shifted back. I gathered up my clothes and headed for the back door. When I got inside, everything was dark. I flipped on the light and looked around. Compared to Lemon's place, mine was bare. There wasn't much in the way of decorations and all the colors were pretty cold and neutral. I never felt the need to decorate or make it more homely until recently. I went down the hall and tossed my clothes in the hamper. I turned the shower all the way up and stepped right in. I'm scared, Axel. It played over and over in my head as the hot water pounded my exhausted muscles. How could I make her feel safe? She seemed so much better since the vampires attacked her. Just being around every spare minute had seemed to have done the trick. She didn't smell scared anymore, so this was a different kind of fear. I needed to show her that I would protect her, physically and otherwise. I had to figure out how to either take that fear out of her heart or give her a reason to see past it. But how exactly did I do that? If I acted on my feelings, if I were to open my heart to you, I wanted more than anything for her to act, for her to open her heart. I couldn't imagine that a mate bond could trump the way I was feeling for Lemon. The day I got her call, when I walked into the inn and saw those vampires about to hurt her, she became the center of everything. She became the sun that my world revolved around. I didn't realize the water was running cold until I turned my face right into the Arctic stream. I jumped back, reaching for the nozzle. When the water was off, I climbed out and grabbed a towel to dry myself. I stepped out into the hall and looked towards my dark living room. Lemon's house felt warm, she was warm. She drew me in with that warmth, and now I was addicted. Instead of picturing her in my living room, the image that came to mind was us together in hers. I could almost feel her cuddled up next to me on the couch, a blanket over us both, watching a movie. With a heavy sigh, I headed to the bedroom to put on some clothes before bed. For now, all I could do was stay the course. Show her I would always be there. Maybe I could wear her down. Maybe, over time, it would just happen without either of us knowing. I could wait, but I couldn't wait forever. Azalea. When Felix and I got back to the pack house, Lily was hovering downstairs. Everything all right? I asked here. Yeah, she said. Can we talk? I gave her a small smile and nodded. We went into the lounge and sat down on the couches. Felix hung near the door, giving us a little space. Lee, she started. I owe you an apology. I've been acting, and it isn't fair to you. I shouldn't have demanded you try to fix Damien and put that burden on you. I am so sorry. She reached forward and grabbed my hand. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you for trying so hard to get him back. I was losing hope, honestly. I wanted to tell you to stop even if it killed me. You didn't, though, and you got him back. It's the best gift you have ever given me, and I will forever be grateful for it. Lily, you don't need to apologize. I knew you weren't acting out of a place of malice, I told her. I really wish I could fix it, and I am so sorry that I can't. I feel awful that he got hurt helping Liam save me. Lily shook her head. Damien would do anything to help both of you. So would I. That's the risk we take in our positions. I pulled her into a tight hug. I would never have given up until I found a way to wake him up, I told her. She pulled away with a sad smile. I know, she said. Her shoulders fell a bit. I am really worried about him and Cage. We will find an answer. We have to, I reassured her. She just shook her head. We both know our chances are slim. I know he says he wouldn't do anything, but my wolf said Cage is in really bad shape. I don't know what I would do if something happened after we spent so long trying to get him up, she admitted. I squeezed her hand. I don't think he will. I think we just need to find a way to keep Cage connected with us. Have you gone with him to shift? She shook her head. It probably sounds selfish, but I am just so scared of seeing him snap, she told me. Maybe if you let Cage and your wolf spend some time together, it will keep him grounded enough not to slip away, I suggested. Maybe, she sighed. I could tell how heavy this was weighing on her. This isn't the end of the world, I promised her. We are all in this together, and we won't stop until we find answers. Lee, you are too good for all of us, she forced out a laugh. She wiped away the unshed tears in her eyes before continuing. So there is something else you should know. What? I asked, worry immediately coming over me. Lacey needs a baby shower, she said, smiling again. We can do a baby shower. I told her, mirroring her smile. Chapter 47. Maddox. Langston and I crept low through the brush. We parked over a mile away and hid the car to keep ourselves as unseen as possible. We were confident that we found where Warwick was hiding and hoped that we would find enough vampires here to be worth attacking. We could smell them all over the place. I kept my eyes constantly moving, trying to map the area we traveled. We chose to come before the sun could rise, hoping that it would be a time they wouldn't expect. If this was the place we were searching for, then we needed to take as much information back as possible. Information about the surrounding area was just as crucial as the hideout itself. Langston motioned for me to slow down as he listened closely. He must not have heard anything of concern because we continued to creep towards our target after a paused moment. Our pace was excruciatingly slow, and it would be only moments before we started to see the sun. As we got closer, the smell of vampire was increasing. If we were not at Warwick's hideout, we were definitely at some sort of camp. We were nearing where we thought Warwick's hideout to be when we started to see the trees thin. We slowed almost to a crawl, making sure that we couldn't be seen. The forest stopped abruptly and a finely manicured lawn sprawled out from it. We came to a stop, hiding amongst the foliage to observe the area before us. Warwick certainly had particular taste because not only was the lawn immaculate, there was a small, southern-style plantation home stationed amidst it. From our vantage point, it appeared the house sat right up against the treeline with the grass area surrounding it on 3 sides. It was a 2-story building, half of stone and the other of white siding. 2 robust columns held up the balcony of the building's 2nd floor. Curtains were drawn against every window, so there were not many ways to glimpse inside. The lawn reached far out in front of the structure, creating a perfectly rectangular lawn. To the far side of us, we could see the less than appealing front of what had to be barrack housing. Opposite the house, there was a gravel road wide enough for only one car that disappeared into the trees. I made eye contact with Langston, who was also taking in everything around us. This was not unlike the area where we attacked Warwick the first time. He nodded his head, and I knew what he was thinking. We needed to get closer and confirm this is where Warwick was holding up. There was still the possibility that he was not here, that we had misinformation, and we were intruding on another sire. Offending another clan and creating conflict there could only end in disaster for us. I pulled out my phone to text Langston that we should check both the house and the other building, but I found the signal unavailable. They were probably blocking in the surrounding area. Creating a dead zone like this was only a giveaway if you were looking for them. I motioned to Langston, trying to convey that it would be faster if we split up. He seemed to be following me. I pointed to myself and the manor before pointing to him and the other dwelling. Although there was the distinct possibility that more vampires were within the other building, we did not need to get inside. We simply needed an idea of what was there to bring back to Alpha. On the other hand, one of us was more than likely going to need to enter the prominent manor to confirm this was Warwick. That seemed like the more dangerous endeavor, and after our last fight with vampire opponents, I wasn't confident in Langston's chances against an older opponent. While they gained strength in age, we lost it. I was afraid Langston and I were pretty evenly matched at the moment, but I probably had more resiliency. The best possibility of us both getting out of here was me taking the more serious risk. Langston seemed hesitant about my plan. I held his gaze, showing him that I was confident about this. Finally, he gave me the slightest nod. I went to move away, toward the back of the big manor house. Langston stopped me by grabbing my arms. "We made it this far," he says almost inaudibly. "You better make it home to Missy." I just nodded, and he dropped my arm. There wasn't anything I wouldn't do to get back to my mate. I crept low and slow through the trees that bordered the too-perfect lawn. I kept my eyes on the house, looking for any sign of movement. It was futile, though. You couldn't see into any of the windows. It was almost creepy how still and perfect everything was. With painstakingly slow progress, I eventually got around to the back of the house and found the back door. There was one that led into the house and a set that looked like they led down into a cellar. All I needed to find was confirmation that Warwick was here, and I didn't know that I could get that in the basement. I held my breath, scanning the area again. It felt a little odd that we had gotten this far and found no one so far. It felt out of place, but then we were out of place. The quicker we confirmed Warwick was here, the quicker we got out. The longer we stayed, the longer our scents were in the air. With a deep breath, I stepped out from the trees and hurried toward the door. After maybe 30 yards of grass, 2 stairs stepped onto a small concrete landing in front of the door. I flattened myself against the stone of the outer wall, straining my ears to listen through the door. I couldn't make out anything discernible on the other side, so I carefully reached out and turned the knob. There was no resistance, no lock keeping it closed. I released the handle, and the door creaked open slowly. My shoulders tensed at the old door's noise. I stood rigid for a moment, waiting for someone to come to inspect the source of the noise, but nothing happened. I let out a long, slow breath. Get in, confirm he is here, get out. Then I could get home to Missy. I steeled myself and slowly pushed the door open just enough so I could slide inside. I slid into a sizable kitchen complete with a hearth full of red embers on the far side. I backed into the corner, crouching in between the wall and a baker's rack. A woman shuffled into the kitchen from the doorway that led into the rest of the manor. She went right to the sink and looked like she was filling a pot. You should leave, you wolf, someone said in my head. I almost jumped out of my skin. I can smell you. It will not be long before Master Warwick can as well. Please do not risk your life further. The woman continued her business at the sink without pause. Was she speaking to me? Yes, I can communicate with you. And I am too old for these shenanigans. Please go quickly and never return. I swallowed the lump in my throat. My gut told me I could trust this woman, and Tom thought we should go. He is usually on the side of ripping vampire throats out, but not this time. As silently as I could, I opened the door again and slid back outside. I didn't pause to close it, I took off straight to the trees. I got far enough into the cover of the woods to move in an upright position. I maneuvered my way to the building Langston was checking as swiftly as possible. If that woman was telling me the truth, it could be literally any minute until someone caught on to us being here. I paused in the covers of the trees, searching for Langston. Come on, I silently pled with him. Azalea. Felix managed to arrange a witch to come the very next day. I spent the morning nervously anticipating her arrival. When it was finally time, Felix and I headed downstairs and waited in the front. A small, older car came into view coming up the packhouse driveway. When it stopped in front of us, the driver climbed out and slammed the door aggressively before coming over to meet us. She was a few inches taller than me with big, bright brown eyes that you could clearly read her emotions from. She had bushy brown hair that hung just below her shoulders and framed her face. She dressed in dark colors but nothing too flashy or noticeable. Felix cleared his throat. Luna, this is Willow. Willow, this is the Luna of Blood Eclipse, Azalea Blackfur, he made our introduction. A look passed between Felix and Willow before she looked at me and held her hand out. Nice to meet you, she said. Her voice was high-pitched and melodic. Thank you so much for coming on such short notice, I said. When old friends call, she trailed off, looking at Felix again. He shifted uncomfortably next to me. I wanted to ask him what was going on or how he knew her, but I couldn't link him, so it would need to wait. Should we, go to my office then? I asked nervously. Willow smiled weakly at me and nodded her head. I turned around and led the way to my office. When we got upstairs, I invited her to take a seat. Felix hovered in the doorway, giving me the idea that he was unsure about joining us. Felix, would you mind closing the door for me? I am sure Willow would appreciate some privacy. He nodded, a moment of insecurity passing through his eyes. He closed the door and left us alone. Clearly, he had to trust this girl to some extent to leave me alone with her, so I wondered if I could trust her to help me. So Willow, did Felix mention why I needed help? I asked her. Hold on, she said. She stood up and waved her hands around, muttering something under her breath. Okay, we can speak candidly now. Anyone listening at the door will hear some indecipherable muttering. Oh, I said, surprised. You seem like a woman who is a bit smarter than this, she said. He sent me a photo of the watch. The incantation is inscribed right on the back. Oh, I said, feeling a little foolish that I didn't make that connection. Those instructions were pretty clear too. Wear the watch, say the word, make yourself equal. So why am I really here? She asked plainly. I narrowed my eyes in discernment. I couldn't tell if I liked her or if I should be suspicious of her. I decided to roll with it for the moment. Why did you come if you knew I had an ulterior motive? I asked. She raised an eyebrow. Humor me, please. She leaned back in her chair, hanging one arm over the back of it. There are plenty of rumors going around about this little war between you dogs and ticks. Plus, the Luna with healing powers. You are also pretty interesting. I raised an eyebrow this time. I chose to ignore the dog jab. I am. I asked. We didn't make my ability widely known, but we didn't hide it either. MMMHMM, she hummed. So, are you involved in our little war? I asked. No, she said. I have no place in that mess. There are some rumors about other witches getting involved, but I can't imagine that number is large. I nodded my head. Okay, I said. Well, I need help. Clearly. There is someone I would like to speak with, but meeting in person would be problematic, I explained. So you need a witch for your half of a projection spell, she concluded. Yes, I said. She watched me for a moment, deep in thought. This is a time-sensitive matter, so, I trailed off, waiting for an answer. I think I might understand why he is here and so loyal to you, she observed. Felix? I asked. You really aren't afraid of anything, are you? You clearly want to talk to someone you are fighting against, which means it's dangerous. You know nothing about magic or my kind, yet you allowed yourself to be closed in this room with me and further allowed the silencing spell to be placed on the room. I can respect the bravery even if it seems a tad foolish, she said. I have nothing to be concerned with. Yes, I want to speak to our enemy, but the only reason I am going about it in this way is the lack of understanding from my mate. I do not fear ending this conflict without more fighting, and I also trust Felix not to bring someone here that could have bad intent, I told her. She gave me a smug smile. You aren't as fragile as you look. Okay, I'll do it. But it needs to be now. I am not coming back here. I jumped on the inside but kept my expression level. Thank you. I will contact them now, I told her. I pulled out my phone and sent a message to Warwick, praying that I would get an immediate response. I guess I will get this ready, she said. She rummaged in her bag and pulled out a candle, then went about clearing a space in the middle of my office. My phone chimed with a message, and thankfully it was Warwick. He says his witch will begin in 10 minutes, I told her. She just nodded as she settled on the floor, sitting cross-legged. I watched as she seemed to be concentrating and preparing herself. The minutes ticked by agonizingly slow. 2 minutes before it was time, Willow looked up at me. You sure about this? She asked. I nodded. You truly know what you are getting yourself into. I need to have this conversation. Either help me or get out of my pack house, I said in a serious tone. She just smirked in response. All right, here we go then, she said. Chapter 48. Missy. I stood at my locker, feeling off as I stared at my books. Holland was antsy, and I had a weird feeling in my stomach. Someone walked by and bumped into me a little too hard, almost knocking me off my feet. There were laughs around me as they passed. I shook my head, trying to ignore this weird feeling. I grabbed my books and shoved them into my backpack. When I closed my locker, I saw Julie and Emmett headed my way. "Why are there so many fake losers at this school?" she huffed, looking around angrily. "You think they would have better things to occupy their time?" Emmett said, rolling his eyes. I just shrugged. I was so used to the stupid taunting that it didn't faze me much. I knew when Maddox was back, it would be like it wasn't happening. "You okay?" Julie asked. "You look a little pale." "I don't know," I told her, biting my lip. "I just feel off. If you need a little companionship." Emmett wiggled his eyebrows. Julie smacked him in the back of the head. "Are you even capable of turning it off?" she growled. Emmett just laughed at her. "Oh, Jules, if you want me to warm your bed, all you have to do is ask," he teased. "I take charity cases too." I knew he was joking, but he was being a little mean to her. Julie had enough because she stormed away from us toward our first class. Emmett laughed as he chased after her. The feeling continued through the rest of the day, only getting worse. By lunch, I felt physically sick, and Holland was whining incessantly. I didn't even bother getting food. I ducked my head and aimed right for the lunch table where everyone was already eating. I sat down, rubbing my temples. I sat down next to Allie and dropped my head into my hands. I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Missy, maybe you should go home," Allie whispered. "I don't know what it is," I said. "Something is wrong, but I just can't figure out what." "Maybe it's the mate separation," Sulian said from across the table. I jumped as I felt something cold splash on me. As I looked up, I realized someone had walked by and dumped their drink on our table, splashing it on all of us. Emmett stood from his chair, ready to hit someone. "What?" Sol shouted. "Charity cases," they laughed as they backed away from the table. I sighed as I wiped the stickiness from my arms. "I am getting really tired," Emmett grumbled as he grabbed a napkin and started wiping his shirt. "Mate," Holland whined. "Holland, do you think he is hurt?" "I don't know." "Something is wrong," she said. It felt like a hole was opening up inside me. I needed to know if Maddox was okay or not. He said he would be home soon if things went well. What if things hadn't? Langston. As I silently searched the halls of the secondary building, flashbacks of our last battle with Warwick's army came to mind. This was above ground, but the sparse conditions and the row of bunks were the same as before. Clearly, he was rebuilding his army, but I couldn't tell where they'd gone to. The place reeked of vampire, but it was empty, void of any leeches that called it home. Occasionally, as I searched the building, I would smell a scent mixed into the overall vampire stench that made my wolf whine and beg me to leave. It smelled like death and decay, and the uneasy pressure in my chest wouldn't abate, nor would the hairs standing up on my neck. Something was wrong, I couldn't tell what it was. "I am an alpha, Graham. Whatever it is, I'm sure we can handle it," I told my wolf, who was fighting for control to make me leave. "Alphas can die too," he replied sullenly, a note of panic still evident in his voice. I'd never heard him like this before, and it worried me. Clearly, whatever I was feeling wasn't just in my head. With my concern growing by the minute about this unknown threat, my mind went to Maddox. I came here to try to keep him safe, and I intended to do so. The last thing I was going to do was let Liam's daughter lose her mate. That pack and those kids had been through enough already. "Don't be so quick to make our own mate a widow," Graham growled at me. "She'll understand," I muttered under my breath, blocking him out for the moment. Making my way back towards where I'd come into the building, I froze as I heard rustling from the tree line outside the door. Maddox's head appeared, gesturing wildly for me to join him. The sinking feeling only worsened as I saw his panicked expression. Something happened. Peeking my head out to look left and right, I bolted to Maddox and came to a stop much louder than I'd intended. "What's going on?" I asked, Maddox's eyes still wide as his eyes darted all around us. "I got caught," he replied, his eyes averted from mine towards the ground in what I assumed was shame. I went into what I think was the kitchen, and a woman's voice appeared in my head telling me to leave. She said Warwick would know we were here any minute. "We have to go." "Don't be in such a rush," a voice sounded out from within the trees near us. "I don't think it's time to leave quite yet." My heart dropped into my stomach, and prickles of dread washed down my spine. The scent from before that was making me uneasy was unmistakably coming from the direction of the voice. I wasn't sure how he'd gotten so close to us without hearing him, but the scent of death was upon us. It couldn't mean anything good. "Why don't you let my young friend go, and you and I can discuss this between us," I forced out, my throat not wanting to work as Graham was biting and clawing at the wall I'd put up to force him out. He was desperate now that the scent was so near. "I do not think that would be wise," he answered, stepping out into view. "It would be best if you both remained." This wasn't good. From his scent and how my body was reacting to it, I assumed he was their version of an alpha. A sire, Theodore had called them. With so few sires, I wondered if they were more powerful than the more plentiful alphas of our race. The only thing I could think to do was keep him talking until I could figure out some way to safely get Maddox out of here. I wasn't resigned to my death just yet, but it was a chance I would take alone. I wouldn't let Maddox die here. He needed to get our intel back to Blood Eclipse and get himself back to Missy. "Emma," Graham roared from within me. "Shut up," I demanded, forcing him out of my mind. "I take it you're a sire then?" I asked, hoping to get any amount of information out of him, indulging his apparent love of theatrics. Why else would he even be talking to us right now? "Ah, of course, you can tell, can't you?" he laughed. "How rude of me. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Harlan Bigrave, sire to the Bigrave clan." "You are?" "I'm not sure that's important right now," I answered, unsure of how much information I should volunteer myself. "Oh, come now, don't be rude. Proper etiquette dictates that you should at least return those niceties in kind when you are introduced to someone. Don't tell me all of you mutts are without manners." Harlan teased, although his smile didn't meet his eyes. I glanced over at Maddox momentarily to gauge his response, and I could see in his eyes he was ready to fight, regardless of the outcome. His steely glare didn't meet mine as he was laser-focused on the sire in front of us. I cursed the moon goddess for my inability to link him. It would make things so much easier. Resting my hand on Maddox's arm to hopefully calm him, I answered the taunting of our foe, "My name is Langston. I am the Alpha of Serenity Waters Pack. This is my Beta, Hendrix." "Ah, an Alpha and a Beta. At least you came yourselves to desecrate our sanctuary and didn't send someone in your stead. We should be honored, should we not?" "We do not intend to desecrate anything," I told him, trying to will Maddox to run. I hoped not telling Harlan he was from Blood Eclipse would make him a less appealing target. "We are simply camping in the area, and we followed the scent here." "Your deceit is unbecoming, Alpha Langston," Harlan declared, his eyes narrowing. "It isn't even a good lie at that." "You caught me," I laughed nervously, my hand finding the back of my neck as I tried to make myself less threatening. "You've been killing so many of our wolves lately that I was hoping to seek a parley with Warwick. I don't care what your conflict is with Liam, it isn't our fight." My, Harlan laughed, his tone more relaxed as he clapped slowly. That is a much better lie. The truth, I offered quickly, hoping to keep him at ease. Even if it were, he began, looking almost sadly between us. I do not agree with the way Bancroft has handled this situation. Nethercoat is no better. Wolves running amok killing vampires creates an environment where your kind don't know they're inferior. You think you're at war with us, but war means that two sides with equal standing to harm the other are in conflict. No, this is a fruitless skirmish between our superior race and you upstart mutts who can't understand the order of the world. I don't wish to be at war with you, and neither does anyone in my pack, I told him. We didn't ask for this. All the same, you cannot be allowed to exist any longer, Harlan told me, his tone more serious now. Warwick has been too lenient in his handling of your species. It's why I volunteered to come here. We've known that you are here since you parked your vehicle. Warwick wanted to capture you and use you as bait. I hold no such illusions. Your kind must be stamped out wherever we find you. Only then can we end this. I sighed heavily, looking over to Maddox, who looked like he was buzzing with suppressed rage as he listened to this leech speak to us as if we were an inferior species. Hopefully, he would be able to use that to get to Blood Eclipse instead of insisting on staying. Graham was calm now, resigned as I was for what was to come. He knew I wouldn't run, and we probably wouldn't make it if we tried. Our only option was to stay and fight. I assume there isn't any way to resolve this then? I asked, knowing the answer but still stalling for time as I began to push Maddox behind me. I'm afraid not, Harlan answered, slowly unbuttoning his sleeves before he rolled them up to his forearms. Maddox, listen to me, I hissed under my breath. I hoped it was quiet enough for just him to hear. I will keep him busy. I need you to run. No, he insisted, pulling away from my grasp. I'm not leaving you here alone. Get back to the pack. Tell them where we are. I will give you as much time as I can. I'm not leaving you, he continued with the hard-headedness that only came with youth. Get back to her, I said simply. She's waiting for you. That seemed to finally snap him out of the rage-fueled trance he was in, and he looked at me in despair, not knowing what to do as I looked back over my shoulder at him. Just go, I demanded, feeling my body swell and the fur sprouting from my skin. Tell Emma I will wait by the moon goddess's side for her. Chapter 49. Azalea, all right, here we go then, Willow said. She pointed to her left. Stand there and face the other direction. I followed her instructions. You will be able to see him, but he will look like a ghost, I guess that is the best way to describe it. He will be able to see you as well. Head to toe. If there is something you don't want him to see, I suggest you make sure you don't let it on. Can he see the whole room? I asked. No, just you, she answered. I am pretty strong, but you probably have only 10 minutes or so for this spell. I can't tell you how long the other witch may be able to last on this, though. I suggest you two get to the point and get there quickly. Understood, I told her. I took a deep breath and stood as tall as I could. I didn't come off as threatening in any way, I wasn't oblivious to that fact. I could make up for that with confidence and grace, though. Willow closed her eyes. Time to party, she murmured. Her brows knitted in concentration as she whispered something under her breath. A moment later, the lights in the room seemed to flicker and dim. A coolness pervaded my office, raising goosebumps across my skin. Suddenly, I was less sure about this plan, but I couldn't back out now. A mist formed in front of me and slowly took the form of Warwick. As his image became clearer, I could see a smug look on his face. He was seated on something, leaning against an armrest with one leg crossed over the other. Finally, the fog that made up his projection seemed to be still. "Well, that took long enough," he commented. "Azalea, how kind of you to accept my invitation." "Warwick?" I nodded. He let out a low chuckle. "Not one for niceties," he mused. "I admire the confidence in such a fragile little thing. But that must come from all those lumbering puppies you surround yourself with." "We are not here to discuss my physical capabilities," I pointed out. "True," he said in a bored voice. "You are curious about other things." I simply nodded my head, waiting to see if he would offer anything up. "Tell me, what do you hope to accomplish with this little, secret rendezvous?" "I presumed you already knew that, but if I must state it aloud, I will. I want to know what it will take to stop all of this. No more bloodshed, no more fighting on either side." "Name your price," I said in a level tone. Warwick laughed. "Your naive mate doesn't even know you have contacted me, does he? You have kept this all from him." "Why?" I considered my options for a minute. Warwick had to be making assumptions about me based on what he already knew of us. We knew he was being fed information via Gwen before he killed her, who surely told him I was an obstinate with no respect for my mate. Warwick's ego was so large, maybe the answer was to play along. "If I answer your question, I expect an answer for mine," I stated. "Fair enough," Warwick said. "You entertain me, and I will reciprocate. It's simple then. My mate is far too protective of me to agree to this. He doesn't believe there is a compromise to be reached. He was trained to solve problems one way, and I don't always think it is the right way," I explained myself. "So you are the brain to his brawn." Warwick laughed. "That's a little cliché, girl." "Not exactly. We just view the world differently," I said. "So you do," he said. I peered at the clock on my wall. We had already wasted 3 minutes. "So, I answered yours, now you answer mine. What will it take to stop all of this?" I demanded. He gave me an appraising look. "Do you even know why this whole rivalry began? Werewolves killing vampires." I guessed. When he held me captive, he mentioned GE of his kind, so the only conclusion I could reach was Liam's great-grandfather was targeting vampires. Again, Warwick laughed. "While you are not wrong, it runs much deeper than that. Did you know, she-wolf, that we vampires also have what you call mates?" I shook my head. I did not know that. To us, they are our destined. It is a far more precious connection than your mate bond because it is very rare. I have lived through much of this world's history, even being present of this country's formation. I only found my destined a century and a half ago. What does that have to do with Liam's great-grandfather? I asked, wanting him to get to the point. "It should be obvious," he said with a shrug. "That black fur mongrel slaughtered my destined." I was shocked and not at the same time. It made sense that this old vampire would wage war against the party responsible for his beloved's death. With the way he explained it, I wondered if it was provoked or not. "I can imagine the loss you felt," I told him. "I imagine there is nothing that could ever be done to make up for that loss. The death of your pack ending with its alpha will be a start," he said smugly. "Surely, you have repaid our people with enough suffering in both the first war and this one. There has to be something that could bring you to a compromise." I tried. He looked at me thoughtfully. Everything was quiet for a minute while I waited for him to answer. I peeked at Willow. She had sweat beaded on her brow, and her hands were fisted over her knees. We didn't have much time left. Yes, he said. There is. I will stop this war, stop my kin from attacking your precious pack and mate if you give me two things. He held up two long, spindly fingers with sharp nails at their ends. What are they? I asked quickly. He chuckled darkly. I think it may be enough penance if every black fur alpha's mate was to be taken from them. First, I want the former Luna. Her life will be the second to last death in this quarrel. I froze entirely. He wanted Lissa? I could never hand over her life. Before I could stop him, he continued. Then, I think you will become my replacement destined. Your mate will hand you over to me, then watch as I turn you and claim you for eternity. All the air left my body. He wanted Liam to hand me over, he wanted to take me as his destined. You better answer quickly, he said. This offer will only last a few more minutes, he said with a sinister smile. I cannot give you Lissa's life. It is not mine to bargain with. I said. And yours? Surely, you can bargain with that. He looked away from me, probably at someone in the room with him. His eyes flashed with anger before he turned back to me. Tick-tock tick-tock. I was mortified. He didn't actually care about Lissa, I could tell by his response. He was testing the waters with that demand. He wanted to take me from Liam. He wanted to watch Liam crumble, and I was the only way that could happen. Liam would never recover, the kids would lose their mother and father. The pack would lose their Alpha and their Luna. I would have to watch Liam be decimated in the most painful way. Our bond would break, and there would be no guarantee I could physically withstand it. Okay, you drive a hard bargain, Warwick said when I didn't answer. Forget my first demand. Just the second one. I want you. Liam stays out of it, I countered. He doesn't need to watch his mate taken from him. The bond breaking will be painful enough. He hummed. No, I don't think so. He will watch. I need more time, I told him. I needed time to think, I was sure I could come up with something to even begin making up for losing his destined. That you cannot have, he said. He stood from his seated position. It seems your intentions were not pure with this little chat either. I am afraid your little spies are creating a nuisance on my property. I will have to go now to take care of this. Wait, what? I exclaimed, but it was futile. Willow slumped over on the floor, and Warwick evaporated. I rushed over to Willow and shook her gently. Willow, Willow, please wake up. I tried to cajole her, she was panting heavily, but her eyes remained tightly closed. Liam. I hadn't heard from Azalea all morning. My mother called a bit ago saying Azalea hadn't answered the phone and she was going to take Azlee to the park. Something was off with Azalea, but I tried to let her be. She didn't always like it when I came in and hovered to make sure she wasn't upset. Gavin was prickling in my head. He felt something was off too. It was getting close to lunch, so I decided just to go collect her, maybe some time alone would fix whatever was going on. I exited my office and looked down the hall to see Felix pacing in front of her office door. While I preferred him to be in the room with her, he and Azalea had found a balance where he would give her some space occasionally. I had never seen him pacing like this, though. What is going on? I questioned, stopping in front of him. Sir, I don't know, he said in a quiet voice. You don't know? I asked curiously. Felix always knew, he worked with information. I could rely on him to predict what Azalea would do before she did it. She had a meeting and asked me to give them some privacy, he explained. You have a key, unlock the door, I told him. He shook his head. I tried, he said. It will not open. I can only hear muffled voices through the door and walls. My eyes widened, and my heart raced. Who is she meeting with? Felix looked away guiltily. She had questions about Greyback's watch, the one she retrieved from the bank. I brought an old acquaintance, a witch, here to help her. A witch is in there alone with my mate? I asked. I had no experience with witches, but I was taught to have a healthy concern for them. It was hard to determine exactly what a witch's capabilities were from appearance alone. She would not hurt Azalea, he said in a steadfast voice. Are you willing to stake your life on that? I growled. I turned to the door and started pounding. Azalea, open this door! I shouted. I couldn't hear anything on the other side, only muffled speech that was impossible to determine the source of. How long have they been in there? I asked him angrily. Almost 30 minutes now, he answered. And how exactly do you know this witch? I spit at him as I pounded on the door. Chapter 50. Maddox. I turned and sprinted as I heard Big Rave's disapproving voice call from behind me, Tisk, Tisk. I will come and find you when I'm done here, boy. It wasn't just a taunt but a promise. He never raised his voice, but I heard it clear as a bell even as I crashed through brush and foliage towards where we'd parked. I heard Langston growl, and Big Rave said nothing in return. The corners of my eyes burned as I fought back the tears of anger and frustration. He didn't think I was man enough to fight by his side, and now I was going to cry like a pup. Why am I so weak? I demanded of myself. The feeling of utter helplessness wouldn't let me breathe as I ran from the alpha that had become my close friend, trying to give me a chance at life. Not weak, Tom countered. You must protect the pack. Protect mate. I know. I exclaimed, cutting him off. I didn't need validation right now. I needed not to be abandoning Langston like a coward. I didn't know what I needed. The sounds of fighting behind me were wholly one-sided. The gnashing of Langston's teeth, his growls, and the sound of his paws on the ground were almost deafening as I tried to block them out. The only sound I could tell was from Big Rave was the solid crunching of him meeting Langston's flesh, accentuated by the occasional involuntary yip from the pain it caused. It didn't sound like Langston was doing much damage of his own if any. Then, I heard it. A sound that I'm sure I'll never forget and was etched into my mind permanently at that moment. A crunch echoed through the forest like the shattering of a tree, and it was followed by a guttural, agonized scream that tore through the distance straight to my core. I felt it. I didn't know what, but it broke something inside me too. I was no longer afraid. No. Tom demanded. We have to get to mate. I ignored him as I turned on my heel and launched myself back into the direction of Langston and Big Rave. I see you're coming back to me, instead. My job will be much easier, I thank you, he called to me loudly from afar, his humorous tone infuriating. I doubled my effort, sprinting what would probably be the fastest I'd ever run in my life. I wanted to kill him. I wanted to tear him apart, I wanted his limbs to adorn the ground as I looked into his terror-stricken eyes before ripping his head from his shoulders. He would look down on no one else. We didn't know our place? No, he hadn't learned his yet. I could smell blood as I got closer, and I broke through the trees where Big Rave was standing on the lawn, no longer perfectly manicured. Trees had fallen on the grass, split and broken into shattered bits with earth scattered around where their fight had poured out of the cover of the forest. I met Big Rave's eyes, and he smiled at me as he pulled a handkerchief from his pocket to wipe away the grime he'd accumulated. I swear the uncivilized manner in which your people fight astounds me. Literal dogs. He spat at the ground in disdain, and that's when I saw him. Langston was in human form, prostrated at Big Rave's feet. Lying face down, I could see him struggling to draw in breath in agonal gasps. He was covered in contusions, but the immediately apparent one was an enormous wound blossoming near the midpoint of his lumbar. Pushing himself up in agony, Langston gasped, "Run!" In horror, I realized what Big Rave had done. Langston's spine was shattered. That was the cracking I'd heard so far away. Langston could only move his upper body as he made anguishing pleas for me to leave him to die. "I won't let you die," I growled, the words barely escaping my lips as the rage blanketed me. It felt like every atom in my body was humming, and my skin was on fire. I needed to spill the vampire's blood. Harlan Big Rave needed to die. "You don't have a choice here, but I admire your pluck, young man." "I'll end you," I declared, not even in control of myself anymore. This had reached a crescendo that I wouldn't be able to back away from, although I couldn't say that I wanted to either. "You ride the line between laudable and foolish for thinking you can do so, but I believe the latter is more appropriate," Big Rave told me, stepping forward and placing his heel onto Langston's back, right where it was broken. He pressed down, letting his weight rest on Langston, and that scream tore through me once more. I was shifted and through the air before I had the conscious thought to do so. I crashed into Big Rave, and his eyes widened in surprise as I tried to close my jaws over his face, intent on obliterating it to nothing. He managed to get his hands up in time to keep my teeth from closing, but they sank into his face and drew blood before he was able to push himself away from me. My initial lunge pushed us far away from Langston, though, so for the moment, he was alive behind me and away from the clash. I was determined to keep him that way, and I was going to make good on my promise to kill Big Rave to do it. Never in my life had I thought that I was a match for an alpha, but every fiber of my being told me I was going to kill this sire that had rendered an alpha to a broken mess with relative ease. I was a warrior, and neither titles nor power mattered anymore, only my will to end the leech in front of me. "How dare!" Big Rave started to spit, his hand clutching his face where my teeth had butchered it. I didn't care for his speeches or his taunts anymore. He could take that to his grave. I lunged once more, interrupting his angry declaration, intent on hitting his face or his neck. This time, he swatted me away, hard. I acknowledged the pain but ignored it. Whatever he just broke. I relentlessly attacked every opening or spot left unguarded by Big Rave, focused on tearing him to shreds in any way I could now that he was foiling my plan to end this quickly. His expression had shifted from disdain to humor at his defeat of Langston, to anger at my attack, and now to nothing short of desperation. I had no thoughts beyond killing Big Rave and getting back to Langston. That was all that mattered. "What are you?" he roared, rocking back on his heels and unable to formulate an attack of his own. If I had been able to answer him, I don't know that I could have. What had I become? 1 minute I was a frightened child being protected by an alpha, and now I was striking fear into the vampire that had crippled him. "Enough!" I raged. I couldn't get an opening to kill Big Rave or even tear off anything to gain the upper hand. It was clear they had been training to fight wolves on 4 legs. While werewolves usually fight in their wolf form, that didn't mean it's the only way that I could fight. I launched myself very openly at his face, making him think I'd made a mistake. His face turned from desperation to glee in an instant as his hand flashed out in a powerful overhand punch that would have probably separated my bottom jaw from my muzzle, only I wasn't there anymore. I'd shifted back, ducking under his punch, my knee hit the ground between his legs, and my arms wrapped around behind his knees. My ear found his hip, and I knew I had him. His momentum carried him right into my arms, and I accepted him eagerly. I exploded to my feet, easily lifting him into the air over my shoulder. Without hesitation, I swung his legs to one side and dropped him to the ground beneath me, driving my shoulder into his chest with every ounce of force I could muster in my body. I heard the breath forced from his body as it was trapped between the unforgiving earth and my shoulder before it shattered beneath him, leaving us in a crater in the shape of his body. Blood spewed from his mouth as I turned my gaze towards him, easily mounting his now weakened frame with one knee next to each hip. Big Rave weakly reached upward towards my chest, trying fruitlessly to push me away. I grabbed one of his wrists firmly in my hand and used the other at his elbow to straighten it, and then I drove my hand through his elbow, snapping his arm in two. Tom purred as Big Rave's screams of agony began to calm the gaping hole that Langston's screams of pain tore into my soul. To Big Rave's apparent horror, I grabbed his other wrist and repeated the process. Now with two shattered arms, he had no recourse to protect himself from me, and I knew this was the end of his life. He knew it too. Big Rave closed his eyes. I don't know who he was praying to because it wouldn't help him now. I grabbed his hair, wrenching his head from the impression in the ground he was molded into. Extending my claw with the other hand, I slashed across his throat and tore it open. Blood drenched me, and Big Rave tried in vain to grasp his throat with his mangled appendages as the life began to fade from his eyes. Standing up, I used his hair to pull him to his knees while he continued to attempt to draw breath after agonizing breath ineffectually. Using his hair to turn his gaze towards Langston, I forced him to look at the person he'd so distastefully thought was beneath him. It would be the last thing he would see. Langton's face was a mixture of emotion I couldn't read, but for a second, I thought I saw horror break through. Stepping behind Big Rave, I reached around his face and grabbed his chin. Placing my knee at the base of his neck, I pushed with my knees and pulled with my hands violently. The vampire's head ripped from his body, which fell heavily away from me, now free of the only thing holding it upright. Looking down, Big Rave was still blinking and looked like he wanted to say something but lacked the vocal cords to do so. Looking into his eyes, I spat. With that, I flattened my hands on either side of his head and put all of my strength into forcing them together. I struggled, and my biceps felt like they were going to tear from my arms, but it finally gave way. Big Rave's skull shattered in my grasp, and he was rendered to nothing more than the stains on my hands. Not bothering to clean the blood and filth from myself or find clothes, I darted to Langston's side. I didn't think I could make his spinal injury much worse by moving him, and he would die if I left him, so I picked him up in my arms gently and began my way towards the car. I strained my ears for any sign of vampires along the way, but no one ever came. They probably thought sending a sire for a wolf or two was overkill, and it should have been. All I knew was that I needed to get Langston to safety, and I wasn't going to let anyone stop me from that mission. Trudging through the forest, I still didn't see anyone, and as I approached the car, I focused on the sounds and scents around us. Nothing. It was a good sign, but I still steeled myself to the fact that if anyone stood between me and the car or Langston's safety, they'd never stand for anything else ever again. Chapter 51. Azalea. Willow let out a groan and relief washed over me. She held out far longer than the 10 minutes she promised. She moved slowly, bringing her arms under her body to push herself up. She was still breathing heavily, and her entire face was damp with sweat. Did you get what you wanted? She panted. I frowned. I guess I had, even if it wasn't the outcome I wanted. There was a weight in my stomach. I had gone through all of this for nothing, it felt. I lied to Felix, snuck behind Liam's back, intentionally hid things from my mate, all to end up no further in stopping the people I love from getting hurt. It isn't the worst outcome I could have imagined, I sighed. Suddenly I heard pounding at the door. Azalea, open the god door right now! Liam roared. I blanched as Willow looked behind her. I am zapped. The silencing stopped, too, she said. She started to struggle to her feet, so I helped her up. The doorknob turned, and Felix and Liam burst through the door, almost toppling over each other. Liam's eyes narrowed on me while Felix's narrowed on Willow. Get out of my pack house, witch, Liam growled menacingly. Liam, I started to bite back at him for his rudeness. No, he roared. You will not argue, Azalea. His eyes were dark, he was probably fighting with Gavin for dominance right now. I have no interest in being here, Willow huffed, stepping away from me. She grabbed her bag and marched to the door. She stopped in front of Liam, looking at him challengingly. I can't leave if you don't move, she pointed out plainly. He stepped aside, watching her leave. Felix watched us before his head turned to Willow. Out, Liam ordered. Felix didn't hesitate. He slid from the room, and I could hear his heavy footsteps disappearing down the hall. I stood statue still, observing Liam carefully. His chest was rising more noticeably than usual. I didn't dare move or speak, I didn't need our bond to read the fury in his body language. His hand came out and aggressively pushed the door closed behind him. He stalked toward me, his posture domineering. I took small steps back until I hit my desk. Liam stopped in front of me, towering over me. His look made me wither under him. Explain, he said in the lowest voice I had ever heard from him. I wanted to know how to use the watch, I said shakily. I knew Liam would never hurt me, but he was scaring the sense out of me. He thundered, slamming his fist down on the desk next to me. I recoiled a bit at his outburst. Why was the witch really here, Azalea? One of Liam's eyes had gone midnight blue, he and Gavin shared control. They were both furious with me for hiding this. It was about the watch, I started. He bristled, so I continued before he could lash out again. But it was also about Warwick. I paused as his shoulders came down slightly. What? About? Warwick, each word was punctuated with rage. I contacted him, I admitted. I used Vlad's phone, he told me how to unlock it. I contacted Warwick, and he agreed to speak with me. We had to use a spell, a projection spell, because there was no way to meet in person. I was shaking as I explained myself. Liam's eyes gave me no clue about what was running through his head. He was only oozing fury. He inhaled sharply. You spoke to Warwick? You went behind my back. I nodded timidly. I didn't think you would agree, right? I don't agree. Goddess Azalea. This could have been a trap, he shouted. Liam, I don't want your excuses this time. I've had enough. I had enough long ago. You cannot tell me you are this naive. Not everyone has good in them, and until you get that through your skull, I can't trust you. I felt the blood drain from my face. He can't trust me? What do you? I cannot run and support this pack while fighting a war when my mate is so determined to hand herself over to the enemy. Let me just take a guess at how that conversation went. You wanted a compromise, you wanted to save us from any more fighting. He gave you some sob story about why he ever attacked us in the first place. You apologized and insisted there was some mutual agreement to be made. Then he made a ludicrous demand, and you told him you would consider it. Am I close? I had never seen Liam so angry in my life. It was like he had snapped. Every other time he had come close to this point, his rage was mixed with hurt and pain. This was pure anger. And he wasn't at all far from the events that just occurred, either. I nodded. He wants me, I whispered. Of course he does. He will do anything and everything to break me down before he comes in for the kill. That is how he expects to win this. My pups. My beta. Your father figure. My father. He isn't always successful, but he knows every strike is a ding in my armor. Liam was practically bent all the way over me as I stood bent backward painfully over my desk. He had never spoken to me like this, we had never fought like this. I didn't agree, I tried to placate him. He just laughed darkly. At least there is some part of your brain actually working. Even if you had, I would never have let you give yourself over. Of all the reckless things you have done, this takes the cake. He stepped away from me, fisting his hair angrily. I slowly stood up straight again. I wasn't sure what to do or how to calm him down. His words were stinging deeper than anything ever said to me before. I swallowed the dryness in my throat. Don't move, he commanded. I could feel the alpha tone in his voice. It wouldn't work on me, but the implication spoke louder than his words did. There was a long, tense moment of silence in the room. It looked like Liam was trying to rein himself back in. I took shaky breaths, trying not to crumble. Unshed tears swam above my lashes as I watched the muscles of his back flex irritatedly. I can't trust you now, he said solemnly. His words were painful, and I had no response. I had earned this response, it was a foolish plan that only brought this misery on. I'm sorry, I whispered, my voice failing me. He shook his head. It's not good enough this time. He turned around and grabbed my arm, his grip tight and painful. I winced, but he showed no reaction. He stormed from the room, pulling me with him. When we got to the stairs, he picked me up and threw me roughly over his shoulder. His steps thundered all the way to our room, where he threw the door open and stomped to the bed. He deposited me there and turned without another look. Do not leave this room, Azalea, he warned. Without another word, he left the room, slamming the door as he went. I stared at it, shaking all over. I didn't bother to stop the warm tears that flooded down my cheeks. Felix out, Liam ordered. He did not need to command me twice. I slipped out of the room, and my footsteps turned heavy as my anger surged. Azalea was unharmed, so my confidence in Willow was just, but whatever they had been doing was less than kosher. I almost caught up to her on the stairs. I could see her dashing toward the front door as I hit the first floor landing. I quickened my pace and caught her by her arm before she could reach the front. She whipped around with irritation on her face. Let me go, Felix, she demanded. I shook my head. I don't care for your stupid stoic games right now. This is none of your business, so let me go. It is my business, I argued. I brought you here to help my Luna and my pack. What did you do? She pursed her lips, refusing to answer me. I shook her arm. Did you put my Luna in danger? I grilled. Your Luna made her own choices. I only helped her so you wouldn't call anyone else. No one else needs to get wrapped up in your new little life, she retorted. I trusted you, I growled. And you left us, she spit at me. Seems you haven't looked back either. Got yourself a sweet gig now. And I didn't miss that mark. You moved on, Felix. You probably haven't thought about her in years. So don't try and drag me here for some righteous cause or whatever. It's not like that. I insisted. Willow's big brown eyes were shining with emotion. She looked so much like her. It sure looks that way. You may be able to forget about her, but I never could. You obviously can replace your mate, but I can't replace my sister. Forget all you want, but she was still real. So let me go and never contact me again. I looked at her disbelievingly. How could Willow ever think that I would forget her? I didn't let go of her arm. She tried to pull away, but I was stronger. I didn't forget, I could never forget. But you do not get to blame me for finding any shred of happiness in this world your moon mother put us in, I said calmly. I let go of her arm and stepped away. I hope you're happy. Keep me out of your stupid dog and tick squabbles. Witches have no skin in this game, she said in disdain. And that Luna of yours? She is going to get you all killed with her compassion. She spun around and left the pack house, leaving me staring in her wake. I would not apologize for Lacey, for finding a shred of happiness. Being Azalea's guard was fulfilling work, sometimes challenging but worthwhile. Being depended on by my Alpha and Luna gave me a sense of pride. But Lacey was light and gave me something to want to live for. She intrigued me and kept me on my toes in ways Astoria had not. Felix. Liam linked me. I knew he was still annoyed at what I let happen. Yes, sir, I answered, turning to go back upstairs. Azalea is in our room. The door is locked. No one goes in or out, am I clear? He commanded. Yes, sir, I replied. Whatever Willow and Azalea did, Azalea probably did not deserve this punishment from Liam. I worried for her as I climbed the stairs to the top floor. I wasn't happy how well she had deceived both of us, but I could understand her reasoning without even knowing what she did. Her mate had been shortening the leash on her slowly for a while, he needed to trust her more. That wasn't my place, though, I realized, stopping outside the door. I turned around and closed my eyes, trying not to concentrate on the quiet sobs of my Luna on the other side of the door. The rest of the audiobooks will be uploaded in the next episode. Join us on Patreon to listen to more unlimited audiobooks.